A few months ago, when autumn had begun to paint the leaves in shades of burnt gold and copper, I found myself alone at home one quiet evening. The sky was dimming, soft streaks of orange and violet bleeding into the shadows of nightfall. Outside, the wind carried the scent of dry leaves and distant wood smoke, whispering through the narrow alleys of our neighborhood like a secret. I was curled up on the couch with the TV murmuring in front of me, but I wasn't really watching. The house felt unusually still. A kind of hush settled over the walls and windows, like the house itself was holding its breath. As the light outside began to fade, I stood up and went from room to room, flipping on every switch, bathing the house in the comfort of warm, yellow light. I even stepped into the chilly courtyard and switched on the yard lights, just in case. I returned to the living room, trying to focus on the program I had been watching. But something didn't feel right. It was subtle at first, just a twinge in my chest, an uneasiness I couldn't explain, a sense of being watched. I turned my head slightly, glancing toward the hallway. No one. But I couldn't shake the feeling that someone or something was in the house with me. I've been home alone plenty of times, both during the day and long after midnight. But this time was different. This time, fear came without warning. It clung to me like a cold mist, wrapping around my limbs, making the air feel heavier than it should. I told myself I was being ridiculous, that maybe I was just feeling a little too isolated. After all, it was quiet. Too quiet. No chatter, no footsteps, no familiar rustles from the other rooms. Still, the feeling lingered. I reached for my phone and called my parents, who had gone to a relative's wedding earlier that afternoon. I tried to sound casual, but my voice trembled just a little. "When will you be back?" I asked. "By 9 or 10, my mother said cheerfully over the sound of laughter and music in the background. "Don't worry, sweetheart. Just watch something nice and relax." I hung up and stared at the phone for a moment, then set it down beside me. But nothing about that evening felt relaxing anymore. The shadows in the corners of the room seemed deeper than usual. The flickering TV screen cast strange shapes along the walls, and worst of all, that presence. I couldn't see it, but I could feel it. Something was watching me, something that moved when I moved, something quiet and careful, as if it didn't want to be noticed, but desperately wanted to be near. That was when I realized it wasn't just watching me, it was taking care of me. Or so it wanted me to believe. The next few hours stretched ahead of me like an endless corridor filled with echoes. 3 or 4 hours of solitude in that kind of creeping fear. It was unbearable. Every minute felt swollen, heavy, dragging me deeper into unease. I stood in the living room, arms folded tightly across my chest, staring at nothing in particular. I didn't want to go back to the couch. Sitting felt too vulnerable. I considered going outside, but the thought of standing alone in the cold, dark yard while something watched me from inside the house was somehow worse. I felt trapped. I had two choices: either brave the cold air for hours or bring people into the house, human voices, footsteps, life. So I reached for my phone again, forcing my fingers to stay steady as I called my cousins. I didn't want them to know I was afraid. I didn't want them to ask questions. "Hey," I said lightly, "I downloaded some new songs. Thought you guys might want to come by and check them out. Bring your flash drives." I could almost hear them exchanging glances on the other end of the line, but after a brief pause, they agreed. "Cool," one of them said. "We'll be there in 20-30 minutes. Relief flooded through me, briefly. Then came the waiting. 20 or 30 minutes had never felt so long. I turned up the TV, loud enough to distract me from the silence pressing in around me. The noise helped a little, filling the spaces where my thoughts were starting to spiral. I paced the floor. I went to the kitchen and poured myself water I didn't want. I sat, stood, sat again. But something was wrong. Something was off. The air felt heavier now, thicker. Every now and then, I swore I heard movement. A soft creak from the hallway. The faintest brush of sound behind a closed door. The whisper of something sliding along the walls. I kept telling myself it was the house. Just the house settling. Just wood and wires and memory. But I couldn't ignore what was happening to my body. My face had started to sweat. Not from heat, but from fear. Cold beads of sweat ran down my temples and neck. My breathing was shallow. My hands trembled even as I tried to act calm. I dared not turn around too quickly, afraid of what I might see. I told myself it was just the waiting, that soon my cousins would arrive and everything would feel normal again. But something inside me already knew. This night would not be normal. And something else was in that house with me. Something that wasn't waiting. 20 minutes had passed, maybe a little more. I could no longer stand it. The house, though lit, though filled with the hum of the TV, felt like a tomb. Every wall leaned inward. Every corner whispered. I told myself I'd just step out for a few minutes, just breathe the cold air, just feel something real. I grabbed my jacket from the hook by the door and pulled on a knit hat with shaking hands. Before leaving, I turned off all the room lights. Only the yard light remained, glowing faintly like a weak lantern in a sea of darkness. I opened the door and stepped outside, chilled not just by the night wind, but by something unseen. Something still pressing against the house behind me. As I reached to close the door behind me, a voice broke through the dark. "Don't close it, we're here." I jumped, heart pounding against my ribs. The voice came from just beyond the gate. A moment later, two figures emerged from the shadows. My cousins. One of them, the general's son, grinned as he stepped forward, oblivious to the storm inside me. "Where were you going?" he asked. I smiled, trying to keep my voice from trembling. "Nowhere," I lied. "I just thought of going to buy some fruit. Maybe seeds and nuts. You know, something for us to snack on tonight." They exchanged glances but didn't question it. Maybe they noticed something in my eyes. Maybe they didn't. But they followed me inside, casually talking about songs and school. We stepped into the house together, the warmth of their company still close around me like a thin blanket. I reached for the wall switch and flicked it. Nothing. No light. Just the click of a dead switch in a house suddenly cloaked in shadow. I frowned and tried the next switch. Nothing. One by one, we moved through the house, the living room, the kitchen, the bedroom. With every failed attempt, the unease began to creep back into my bones. "Maybe a fuse," my cousin suggested, pulling out his phone to use its flashlight. We followed the narrow hallway to the meter box. The faint blue glow from the screens in our palms lit our way. My heart thudded louder than our footsteps. The electricity meter was working. Everything seemed normal, but the lights still refused to come on. After a few more minutes of poking around, my cousin ran his fingers through his hair and muttered, "Maybe the wires burned out, or someone messed with them." The idea was strange, but not impossible. Still, I couldn't let go of the tension twisting in my stomach. I went to get the old metal tripod from the closet and climbed carefully up the steps to the ceiling lights. One by one, I checked each bulb, and what I saw made me freeze. The light above me was unscrewed, hanging delicately in its socket, loose on the verge of falling. I adjusted it carefully, twisted it into place, and it flickered to life. The room was instantly flooded with warm yellow light. I looked around, heart pounding. Then I moved on to the next room. The same. The bulb was barely attached. Again I tightened it, and again it lit up. 5 rooms, 5 bulbs. Every single one had been loosened, deliberately. The air around me felt colder now, as if the light had illuminated more than just the walls. It had revealed the reality I didn't want to face. This hadn't been an accident. It hadn't been faulty wiring. Someone, or something, had unscrewed the lights. Silently, quickly, precisely. When I told my cousins what I had found, I expected them to laugh or brush it off. But they didn't. Their smiles faded. One of them looked toward the hallway. The other scratched the back of his neck and said quietly, "Yeah, you shouldn't be alone here tonight." We left the house. For the next 3 hours, we drove through the city streets, trying to talk about anything but the house. We ate dinner in a quiet place, but I barely tasted a thing. My mind was still spinning. Who could have done that? How could anyone have unscrewed 5 light bulbs in every room in under half a minute, without making a sound, without being seen? There were no signs of forced entry, no footsteps, no shadows caught at the edge of my eye, just silence, and light fading where it should have stayed. And a single, chilling thought refused to leave me alone. Who had been in that house with me? And what were they trying to do in the dark? When my parents came home later that night, I sat them down and told them everything. I described how the lights refused to turn on, how each one had been unscrewed, how I had to tighten them myself to bring light back into the house. I told them about the fear, the cold sweat, the whisper of something unseen that had clung to every second I was alone. But they didn't take it seriously. My mother smiled gently, brushing my hair back from my face. My father chuckled and said, "You must have unscrewed them yourself without realizing it. Sometimes our minds play tricks on us when we're alone." I nodded, not wanting to argue. But deep inside, I knew what I'd seen and what I had felt. Days passed. 4 or 5, maybe more. The air in the house seemed to settle, but something beneath it still stirred. It didn't feel over, just quiet for now. And then came the night my mother and I went into the city, leaving my father alone at home. We returned late. The air was cool, and we were tired from errands. My father greeted us at the door, a strange look on his face, half amused, half uncertain. "I had a little experience last night," he said with a dry laugh. "What do you mean?" I asked. He leaned against the wall, arms crossed. I turned off all the lights and went to bed. It was maybe 2 in the morning when I woke up, and the bedroom was fully lit. At first I thought maybe I'd forgotten to turn it off. He paused, watching our faces. But then I walked into the living room, and that light was on too. In fact, all the lights in the house were on, every single one, just glowing like someone had been walking from room to room, flipping switches. My mother blinked. "Maybe you forgot." "That's what I told myself," he admitted. "I was tired. Maybe it slipped my mind. So I turned everything off again and went back to bed." He looked at me then, his expression harder. Half an hour later, I woke up again. The room was glowing. Every light in the house was on, again. A silence settled between us. Nothing happened that night. I couldn't sleep until morning. Maybe my father couldn't either. The next day, my father told his friend everything, about the house, the lights, and the strange incident. His friend listened, half amused, half skeptical. Though the lights had stopped turning on by themselves in the days that followed, we both knew it wasn't over. Some things don't want to hurt you. They just want you to know they're there. Days turned into weeks, and the house slowly returned to its usual quiet rhythm. The mysterious lights no longer flickered on their own, and the heavy presence seemed to retreat into the shadows, at least for now.